now day 3 of Trump's fugue state crisis. From Monday night at Oaks, Pennsylvania, when Trump abruptly stopped the town hall inexplicably and began to slur and behave bizarrely, through his announcement that Kamala Harris is physically disqualified from being president because she has hay fever, through his canceling of a softball interview on CNBC the same day she was to be interviewed by Fox, to the question from the Economic Club of Chicago about whether or not Google should be broken up, which he answered by talking about voting in Georgia. Day 3 of this, and we still have no official explanation for the series of episodes in which Trump has seemed to recede from reality, though there is an amazingly disturbing suggestion from an expert on cults, himself a cult survivor, who says this is what cult leaders do when they run out, when their repertoire shrinks and their talking points melt. That explanation in a moment, and the media reaction and non-reaction, and the one news outlet that did not sane wash the start of the fugue state crisis. But first, the start of the fugue state crisis. As 2 people in the crowd fainted, Trump cut off his town hall after 4 questions and then stood there on stage for 39 minutes.
Let's not do any more questions. Let's just listen to music. Let's make it into a music. Who the hell wants to hear questions, right?
Music mix number 7 million went on for 39 minutes. 39 minutes. 39 minutes of him standing there as music that he selected played. Music ranging from Time to Say Goodbye to Nothing Compares to You to Ave Maria to YMCA to Elvis singing Dixie. Thank you. Thank you very much. The 39 missteps for you Hitchcock fans. Even the Washington Post noticed. Its headline made its own headlines. Trump sways and bops to music for 39 minutes in bizarre town hall episode. Vice President Kamala Harris has called Trump 78 unstable and questioned his mental acuity. The Post used real words and phrases like meandering, almost as if he were taking a trip back to decades past, and it repeated bizarre and bopped. And presumably most odious to Trump, the Post said he, quote, stood on stage in his oversized suit. Ooh. The Post, though, was alone in refusing to sane wash whatever malfunctioned inside Trump, and, by the way, continued to malfunction in a series of posts later Monday night and throughout the day on Tuesday. Trump bobs his head to music for 30 minutes in odd town hall detour. The New York Times, of course. After multiple interruptions, Trump cut off questions and seemed to decide that it would be more enjoyable for all concerned, and it appeared for himself, if he fired up his campaign playlist. The Times can read Trump's mind about how he seemed to decide and how it appeared for himself that it would be better to play music in the middle of a campaign event, but it could never say something like, it seemed and appeared he was lying through his effing teeth. Trump's Pennsylvania town hall turns into impromptu concert after medical incidents. The headline in the Associated Press, turns into, as if it were transformed by magical potions from Harry Potter. Medical incidents. As if Trump didn't clearly have one a day. And the worst of them all, Trump turned a town hall event in front of supporters in Pennsylvania, wrote NBC News, into an impromptu listening party Monday night. Somebody who did not sane wash this listening party my ass was the Vice President of the United States.
His staff won't let him do a 60 Minutes interview. Every president for the last half century has done one, anyone who's running for president. Everyone has done it, except Donald Trump. He will not debate me again. I put out my medical records. He won't put out his medical records. And you have to ask, why is his staff doing that? And it may be because they think he's just not ready and unfit and unstable and should not have that level of transparency for the American people.
A man named Matthew Remski shook up the yoga world 5 years ago with articles and a book called Practice and All is Coming: Abuse, Cult Dynamics, and Healing in Yoga and Beyond, about so-called gurus turning yoga groups into conspiracy-riddled cults filled with sexual abuse. The vice president may have seen instability. The Washington Post may have seen bizarre meandering. Mr. Remski saw something else, and it was more familiar and more frightening to him, and I quote him in full from Twitter X. Quote, Trump surrendering the Q&A to 30 minutes of his fave songs while standing on stage, awkwardly conducting at times, echoes many instances of cultic leaders who, exhausted, ill, and at the end of their cognitive rope, outsource their emotional dominance subroutines to canned music they personally find exquisitely sentimental. He continues, as traumatized narcissists, they are seeking comfort and avoiding work, but also assume that their core memories of pleasure will make their power and soul transparent and accessible to their followers. Yes, it's weird. No, the campaign gives no explanation because the logic is a sealed system. Believers lose themselves in the choruses. Handlers know there's nothing they can do but keep him propped up. Kristi Noem knows her inner circle status depends on staying bright-eyed. Mr. Remski continues, the leader of the group I was in for 3 years maintained a Trump campaign-like schedule of daily 2-hour sermons. Over the years, he increasingly relied on his DJ to fill the room with emotional overwhelm whenever he gapped out. He was 78, too. He air-conducted the tunes. He had a shrinking repertoire of melted talking points, but because there was never any substance to his schtick, he didn't struggle to remember details that were slipping away. He just turned to the music. All he had ever done was generated a mood. Then he died of a stroke. It may be helpful, he continues, to keep in mind, for Trump followers, the default to pure emotionality can be effective right up until the end. For some, the intensity of their bond might increase because for them, as for him, the affect was the point. They weren't there for the platform. There are people in the crowd who are uncomfortable or who can recognize the signs or get bored and leave early. But for those really caught up, that 30 minutes of music and reverie might feel like the most direct and intimate contact they've ever had with him. Jeez. So, when you and I have thrown around the now familiar phrase, it's a cult, we may have been saying more than we could have possibly known. Mr. Remski also agreed that whatever began on Monday night appears to have been touched off when 2 attendees fainted in the warm, close room. A respondent to his thread noted that the last thing someone like Trump tolerates is other people's suffering. That 2 people fell ill and caused his rally to be interrupted was an intolerable affront to his being the only one. He reacted to that with an extended, primitive basking in the wonder of him, unquote. To which Remski replied, on point. So, what began Monday night and continues at this hour, did Trump choose this? Or was it something else? Could it have been a true psychiatric episode, what the experts are now calling dissociative fugue? If you've seen this or heard about fugue states, dissociative episodes, it's probably from a film or on television, most notably in an episode of the old series Breaking Bad. It is an event in which whatever binds us to the world, even just our own world, loosens a bit, or sometimes breaks completely. Sufferers often just wander off, physically or just metaphorically, leave their homes and wind up hundreds, thousands of miles away with no idea how they got there. While in the fugue state, they can't remember who they are, or at least they can't fully remember that. They may not know where they are or where they have been, but they can do ordinary things like drive a car somewhere without getting into an accident, or appreciate the breeze as they wait for an Uber. I have seen this happen to someone close to me, and it is terrifying. And it is not voluntary, and it is often followed by an absolute refusal by the victim to acknowledge that it was at all important, or by their making a rush to find an excuse, like I was impaired by drink or drugs or illness, even if there was no drink or drugs or illness. And Trump either entered into that Monday night or into that end-stage cult leader meltdown Matthew Remski described from his firsthand experience with that. What may be the most frightening part here is that when you abruptly end your campaign event, start a 39-minute wobble on stage accompanied by Sinead O'Connor, go into a kind of dictator waltz, and that's not the most unstable thing you will do in the next 24-hour span, you are in real trouble. Because within a few hours, Trump went to his only true home, his phone, and attacked Vice President Harris for refusing to do interviews, even though she had just loudly agreed to the sit-down with Bret Baier on Fox News. But Trump also attacked Harris for releasing her medical records and for Harris asking why Trump had not released his. He said he had. And he's too busy anyway. I've put out more medical exams than any other president in history. Flatly, numerically untrue. And aced 2 cognitive exams. The doctor stated that my cognitive exams were exceptional. I am far healthier than Clinton, Bush, Obama, Biden, but especially Kamala. Also, I am far too busy campaigning to take time from the 22 days left, as I am using every hour of every day campaigning because we've got to take our country, blah, 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 blah. 12:42 a.m. I am far too busy campaigning to take time from the 22 days left, as I am using every hour of every day campaigning. But first, the Bee Gees. Most disturbingly of all, in this part of the crazy time, Trump then said Harris is physically disqualified from serving as president because her medical report, which she released when he would not release his, shows she suffers from urticaria, allergic rhinitis, and allergic conjunctivitis. Urticaria is hives. Allergic rhinitis is hay fever. Allergic conjunctivitis is allergies making your eyes itch. According to her doctor's report, she suffers from urticaria, defined as a rash of round red welts on the skin that itch intensely, sometimes with dangerous swelling. She also has allergic rhinitis and allergic conjunctivitis, a very messy and dangerous situation. These are deeply serious conditions that clearly impact her functioning. Maybe that is why she can't answer even the simplest of questions asked by 60 Minutes and others. What is this all about? I don't have these problems. Urticaria is hives. Allergic rhinitis is hay fever. Allergic conjunctivitis is allergies making your eyes itch, you bastard. Trump either thinks or expects he can get everybody else to think that these commonplace, everyday annoyances are fatal. And then we moved to Chicago yesterday. Where to start? He's close to winning, or at least being ahead in Michigan, so he trashed Detroit. The Bloomberg British guy moderating the event asks about Google. He answers about Georgia. Oh, no, I know where to start. Trump is pressed about talking to Putin after he left office, that report from last week, and Trump gives the O.J. Simpson memorial answer. If I did it.
Can you say yes or no whether you have talked to Vladimir Putin since you stopped being president?
Well, I don't comment on that, but I will tell you that if I did, it's a smart thing. If I'm friendly with people, if I have a relationship with people, that's a good thing, not a bad thing, in terms of a country.
Should Google be broken up?
I just haven't gotten over something the Justice Department did yesterday, where Virginia cleaned up its voter rolls and got rid of thousands and thousands of bad votes, and the Justice Department sued them that they should be allowed to put those bad votes and illegal votes back in and let the people vote. So I haven't gotten over that. A lot of people have seen that. They can't even believe it.
The question is about Google, President Trump.
If everything works out, if everybody gets out and votes on January 5th.
Yes, please. Trump voters. If you're voting for Trump, don't forget to vote for Trump on January 5th. January 5th. If you need a lift on January 5th, call me. All this is nothing new. It is, in fact, so part of the Trump baseline that to say he is acting abnormally and bizarrely even for him, even that's been reduced to white noise. But even by that measure, this is accelerating and dangerous because Trump may think hay fever, hives, and itchy eyes are fatal. Nobody thinks Trump's dissociative fugue or late-stage narcissistic collapse is fatal, unless it makes him decide he can fly, or unless it is a forewarning of something actually going physically wrong inside his head. Well, I hate to put it this way, but all that is his problem. Unfortunately, for the rest of us, it can easily be fatal, because this man, in this condition, he could easily kill us all. And as noted before, some of the key people along the tattered, broken remains of some of our key guardrails are still sane-washing him. Joseph Kahn, executive editor of the New York Times, has been interviewed at length by Steve Inskeep of National Public Radio. The result is almost as disturbing as Trump playing the hits. Playing the hits from that radio station that broadcasts only inside his own mind. I'm going to read a lot of the transcript of this interview verbatim because Joe Kahn is almost as detached from reality as is Donald Trump. And unfortunately, Joe Kahn is supposed to be on our side. And when I say our side, I mean on the side of defending democracy and opposing dictatorship. I think we can ask that much of the New York Times. Mr. Kahn does not understand anything of this, as you will hear. That's next. This is, Newsy allegedly says RFK Jr. wanted to possess and impregnate her. Well, who doesn't? And this report is from the Wall Street Journal. That's next. This is an all-new edition of Countdown, if I can stop horse laughing.
George Carlin, pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. This is the best news show ever. I told that to one of your producers, and I want you to know that. I've seen them all, and it's just, especially the first 35 minutes.
Thank you, sir.
It's just unparalleled.
I got bad news. Between you and I, we got 6 minutes to completely screw that into the ground.
Okay,
right?
That's good.
Still ahead of us on this all-new edition of Countdown. Worst person. So what do you like worse? The poll that has Trump up 51-50, huh? Or my ex, Olivia, saying RFK Jr. wanted to impregnate her, according to the Wall Street Journal. First, postscripts to the news. Dateline, New York. Sometimes stuff happens and you say, no, he can't be that stupid. He can't be that naive. He can't be that disconnected. Trump? No, I mean the editor of the New York Times. His name is Joe Kahn. And Joe Kahn did a lengthy interview with Steve Inskeep of NPR. And I don't normally read transcripts of interviews, but it's not like I can just play the whole interview. I mean, there are still copyrights in this country. And the thing is, the relevant parts of that interview, the parts about how the Times has drifted off to sea and is headed towards icebergs, but everybody on board thinks they're still tied up at Pier 83 at 42nd Street on the Hudson, they're so startling. I kind of have to read it and try to translate as we go along. So it starts with the NPR guy Inskeep noting that nobody would have ever believed the Times would be under such assault from the left. And Joe Kahn says, and I'll interrupt him when necessary, quote, I struggle with it often because the left has really high expectations of the New York Times. I think some of them, honestly, distorted. There's a desire to see one of the leading journalistic institutions in American life be a full-throated supporter of the view that many on the left have, which is that Donald Trump is an existential threat to our society, and that all of the New York Times coverage should be uniform in emphasizing that point day in and day out. How did you feel about Hitler? Well, we know how the Times felt about Hitler. They downplayed the threat of Hitler, too, until it was too late. Because this idea of never taking an opinion, never, ever deciding whether or not it's actually raining, but deferring to some expert somewhere who has his head out the window and is going, "I'm wet, it's raining," we can quote him. That has been part and parcel of this operation. But it's never had to deal with this society being in jeopardy before, and Joe Kahn does not see the difference. If you go back and look at how the New York Times covered the Civil War, there was no question. They agreed that the South was an existential threat to our society and that people were dying, and that Times coverage should be uniform in emphasizing that point in and day out. To resume. Quote, "And then we would be playing the role that some on the left see as our proper role. We don't see that as our proper role," which is not to say that we don't have really aggressive coverage about the threats that Donald Trump and some of the people around him would pose to norms in American society, to the rule of law. Would. He thinks it's would. Would pose. He's doing it now. He's destroying American society now. Even if he loses, he's already done untold damage to this society, and you're still putting it in the theoretical. He's an election denialist and has a variety of plans in place that would weaken some of the institutions of democracy in American life. Well, 100% is some. 99% is some. 100% is not some. We've made that very clear. What we've also made clear is that he has the potential to win the 2024 election, either in the popular vote or in the Electoral College. That a lot of people around the country hear things from Donald Trump that they like, and that makes them very strong supporters of him. That his favorability ratings have actually risen from the time that he ended his presidency, and that he speaks for some of the frustrations and grievances in American life. And we feel we need to reflect those as well, because we need to provide a full, fair, and complete picture of the country and its voters. And we're not ourselves voters. What we are is an information source for voters who want good, accurate, fair information about our country. I'll translate that, and I don't think Joe Kahn would like it. If he's covering Hitler, what he's saying here is Hitler had some good ideas. Trump has some good ideas. So we should listen to the good ideas, never mind that the good ideas inexorably and utterly are connected to the disastrous ones that could kill us all. It is the Times in a nutshell. They will point out, well, he speaks for a lot of the country. Those people are crazy, and they want to destroy American democracy. But he speaks for them. I don't know. How about the Boston Strangler, who speaks for strangling? A question from Inskeep of NPR. Your publisher, A.G. Sulzberger, wrote an op-ed that he submitted to the Washington Post some days ago in which he talked about this organization's thinking about the immediate future and the possibility of a second Trump term. And he disclosed that you've spent several months studying authoritarian countries and the way that the press has been undermined there to prepare for what possibilities there might be here. What is the research that you've done? Joe Kahn answers, well, we've certainly covered this issue as a news story around the world, and as you said, the publisher devoted a team of people in a significant effort to looking at the ways in which the rule of law, protections for the press, could be worn away by either authoritarian leaders or by populist leaders who rally their supporters against independent media. Well, thank goodness you studied it before they came up and shot your newspaper in the head, Joe. Thank God. Don't try to defend it. Just report on it. I've just been shot in the head. Let me tell you what we saw. Before I black out and then die, I just was shot in the head. Let me report on it like a good Times man. The question from Inskeep. And the question was, how do we survive in that environment? Joe Kahn says, and one of the answers to that is the publisher made the decision to make it very clear that part of the solution to that is building a strong coalition of people in this country who are determined to maintain freedoms of the press as they are in the Constitution. Yes, I think that strong coalition of people in this country, as opposed to Trump with all the military resources and the desire to use the U.S. military on U.S. soil, especially against the people he personally does not like, say, everybody who's ever worked with, or for, or subscribed to the New York Times. I think your coalition will really stand up and defend American freedom of the press and democracy and its role in democracy for a solid 16, 17 minutes. You're an idiot, Joe Kahn. And he's not done yet. Quote, and we shouldn't pretend that they're only vulnerable in a place like Hungary or Turkey, except that's exactly what you're doing, pretending, that they are also vulnerable here unless there's a strong constituency of people who are determined to protect them. That obviously includes, but can't be limited to, the media itself. It has to include the vast majority of Americans who benefit from having a vigorous and free press. So building popular support for that is critical. Joe Kahn has actually said this. We're going to rely on our readers and good, trustworthy, patriotic Americans to come to our defense when trust in the news media as a whole has literally, statistically, never been lower than it is right now. And that includes, and this will surprise the people at the New York Times, the American media includes the New York Times. The lack of trust in the American media includes lack of trust in the New York Times. They don't realize that. They think they are a separate entity. They think they are a living statue. They think they are a living church. They're some sort of monumental arch. Oh my God, he's going to have a coalition. Your coalition is going to be standing there defending freedom of the press with a petition. If Trump gets back into office, it's going to require a revolution to get him out of office or his death. He's not leaving otherwise. He's not. Don't you see this? You're in the news business. I would think this would qualify as news. Oh, no. Just give me 2 Wordles a day and I'll be happy. Another question from Inskeep of NPR. People will write, people who are opposed to Donald Trump, and they will say, why are you covering the election the way that you are? You should be covering it the way I say, because if Trump wins, you'll be in jail. Here's the answer to that one. Yeah, we do hear that. And I should acknowledge that covering Donald Trump is a challenge. It's a challenge every single day. Oh, thank God, Joe Kahn. I didn't know you knew that. That's not a joke. I literally did not know that anybody at the New York Times understood that it was a challenge every day. There are some moments in which we think we need to present Donald Trump in a full, unfiltered way so that people can hear the kinds of things that he's saying in his rallies and saying on Truth Social, his social media site, and not try to put them in a kind of fact-checked or, overly contextualized context, because people should hear the raw Donald Trump. And then there's criticism on the other side that you're giving him a platform, that you're just allowing him to say whatever he's going to say, steal the agenda. So which way is right? Actually, we struggle with that ourselves, too. I think people do need to hear, to some extent, the unfiltered Donald Trump, but they also need to have us, provide that kind of factual correction. On page B32. And we need to be conscious about not just providing Donald Trump with an open mic, except every headline about Donald Trump, except the one about his mental condition from last Sunday, has provided him with an open mic and an open mind and a sense that, no, he's probably not crazy. No, he's probably not Hitler. No, he's probably not a dictator. Let's just quote him and see if we can make it as deflavorized as possible. Quote, I don't think there's any magic formula to doing it. It's just a bunch of journalists talking to each other, looking at the facts every day, trying to decide the best way of conveying all the aspects of the Trump campaign. And do we always get it right? I don't know if we always get it right. You don't always get it right, moron! I know that we're always trying our best to serve the broadest possible readership with the best journalism about him that we can. I forget who it was who said that as the Democrats are being led into the concentration camps, along with all of the Hispanics and everybody from Haiti and eventually all the African Americans and eventually all the minorities and all the Jewish people and everybody else, as we're all led into the camps by Trump's, SFS or whatever he's going to call it, or STS or STD, as we're all let in there, one guy can turn to another and said, well, on the other hand, at least we followed all the rules. Would you argue, he's asked, that you ought to cover the election in a straightforward way as you see it, even if it does mean you might end up in jail sometime? Quote, well, I mean, we've devoted a lot of resources to covering what you would broadly refer to as kind of the fragility of the legal system and the fragility of our democracy. I don't consider that to be a partisan issue. I think that is something that we will come at directly. It's inside 2 weeks to the election, buddy. When is it that you're going to come at this directly? We've put it front and center in our election coverage, both the election integrity issue and where the candidates stand on that. What? The election integrity issue? You mean that he's going to try to steal the election again? Or his claims that there's something wrong with the elections, now or in the past? And it's very clear that there's a sharp difference between the candidates on that issue, the ability of the legal system to withstand the kind of retribution that Donald Trump is promising, you know, the resilience in the judicial system, the issue of independence of the Department of Justice and the FBI, which he would like to erode. We've devoted a lot of resources to that. Did you ever see the movie Monty Python's Meaning of Life, where they're having a board meeting at an American corporation? And Graham Chapman says, item number 12 on the agenda, the meaning of life. Stan, I understand you've had a team working on this. And Stan, played by Michael Palin, says, yes, that's right, and we found it divides into two observations. Number one, people are not wearing enough hats. 2, matter is energy. What we believe to be life is, in fact, a series of vibrations, and on 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 and on, and he goes. And finally, at the end of this presentation, with the music swelling in the background, Terry Jones, the late Terry Jones, my friend, looks up from the board table and goes, what was that about hats again? And Palin goes back through his pages of notes about the meaning of life and goes, people are not wearing enough of them. And Terry Jones, with rage in his voice, goes, when you say enough, enough for what purpose? We've devoted a lot of resources to that. Whether or not, you know, Trump is going to take the legal system and direct it at, say, you know, all of us, including the New York Times. We've devoted a lot of resources to that. What was that about hats again? New York Times hats? I mean, caps with our logo on it? Does the logo have the Wordle logo on the back? Because that could really increase Wordle usage, especially while everybody's in jail. You can get Wi-Fi in jail, can't you? We've devoted a lot of resources to that, said Mr. Khan. We had a very excellent piece looking at retribution and how it played out through the judicial system in Trump's first term and what he would do differently this time that makes that issue utterly clear. So I don't think we're standing by while these threats exist. I don't think that's the same thing as saying that we don't also cover all the other issues on voters' minds. I think we have to do both, and we are doing both. I'm waiting for the headline in the Times. If Trump wins, the only thing I'll be reading after that, as I pack, the only thing I will be reading is the following. The Times headline that reads, we're all going to hell, comma, some say. From Steve Inskeep's interview with Joe Kahn, executive editor of the New York Times, who thinks he is doing exactly what it is obvious to everybody else in the world, including real journalism critics like NYU's Jay Rosen and real journalists like the great James Fallows, what is clear to them and everybody else that he is not doing. And the through line is, no matter how bad it gets, Joe Kahn's going to be fair and balanced between the psychopath who would be Hitler, who wants to kill him, and the other presidential candidate who doesn't. Because there will always be a New York Times. That's the through line in his answers. There'll always be a New York Times. It's a law. He doesn't actually say there'll always be a New York Times, but he might as well. That's the whole premise. Yes, there are many problems here, but none of them are going to affect me. I know the water is up to my neck, but it's fine. I read this, and I flashed back to November 1980, One of my first bosses was the bureau chief of another really important and venerable and at one point truly respected news organizations that was part of the firmament, as clear and as regular as the moon in the nighttime sky. United Press International. He was the bureau chief of United Press International's radio network, UPI Audio. His name was Stan Sabic. I can never think of Stan Sabic without smiling. The amount of crap he put up with from me, I can't count that high. But he once told me that if he was ever remembered for anything in broadcasting, it would be for giving me my first real job. And I had to go in one day in November 1980 and tell him I would be leaving to go and work for a different radio network. He was absolutely stunned. How could you leave UPI? Stan, I'd work for you forever. But 2 months ago, your drunken boss came in here drunk, saw you and me arguing about something, arguing and laughing at the same time, and he fired me. I had to get the union involved or I would have been fired. But how could you leave UPI? Stan, this new job at RKO pays me 40% more for like 40% less work. That's one thing. And they're full of other people my age, kids like me, who want to do things that'll make radio better and keep the business alive. I don't know if you notice this, it's in trouble. Now Stan laughed. But RKO's only been around for 1 year. UPI's existed. We've been here since 1907, and we're full of kids working here. You're a kid working here. Why would you ever leave UPI? Stan, how many people under 30 have left in the last 6 months? I mean, how many just from the sports desk out there in the main newsroom? You're not paying as much as a newspaper in New Jersey. You just lost a guy into a newspaper in New Jersey. I'm going to be 22 in 2 months. The next youngest person at the radio network is 34. If your bosses keep treating young writers and young sportscasters like you've treated me, there won't be a UPI in 10 years. Now Stan Sabic brayed with laughter. Seriously, there will always be a UPI. 20 months later, UPI was sold and downsized, and the radio network was moved from New York to Washington. Stan Sabic left to become manager of a restaurant in Katona, New York. In the year 2000, UPI was sold again to the Unification Church of South Korea, to the Moonies. There'll always be a UPI. And from what I heard Joe Kahn say in that interview, he has that same certainty that there'll always be a New York Times, even if it's printed by the prisoners in cell block H. Nothing Trump could ever do could change that. But first, here's Pavarotti and Guns N' Roses. Worsts and the exact moment at which your ex and her ex become irresistibly funny to you. That's next. This is Countdown. Messing with the format today because there's so much news. There's too much news. Please, I can only handle so much news, please. But there's still more new idiots to talk about. The daily roundup of the miscreants, morons, Dunning-Kruger effect specimens, and ex-girlfriends who constitute today's worst persons in the world. I'm so tired. The bronze, Russell Brand. You remember Russell Brand? He's now hulking an amulet to protect you from corrupting signals at airports. You wear it, or you stick it on your phone, or you stick it up your Russell Brand, and it protects you from Wi-Fi signals and electronics and waves and other evil energies. He says, evil energies. And it only costs $239.99, and you say it protects me from all evil energies? You mean it protects me from Russell Brand? What a bargain! The runner-up, worser, the Twitter X account Politics Polls. Now, I know everybody thinks the polls are better, or at least the pollsters are trying harder this year. But coming down the stretch, speaking only for myself, my confidence is shaken. At Politics Polls posted this yesterday. Pennsylvania via American Pulse U.S. poll. Trump, 51%. Harris, 50%. 1,193 likely voters tend to... Wait! 51 to 50? Now, I'm just a simple country lawyer who never got no further than third-grade advanced theory of relativity studies back in school in my one-room schoolhouse. But back where I comes from, a prediction of a 51% to 50% outcome might be raising some eyebrowses. The award, you'll notice, went to the Twitter aggregation account, not to American Pulse Polling, even though they are wobbly right-wingers, because as American Pulse Polling says, somebody don't know how to round up. Their numbers in Pennsylvania are actually Trump 50.5, Harris 49.5, and you can't round up when you're already at 100. That's how that works. Somebody went to 51 and 49 and made it 50. You got it now? In any event, don't tell that bizarre guy Kornacki about this, who I also got started on TV at Current TV on the recommendation of, are you ready? Kornacki was recommended to me by Olivia Newsy. And then one day he didn't show up because he'd signed a contract with MSNBC and he didn't bother to tell any of us at Current. If that twerp Kornacki hears that there's a poll out there that's 51-50 Trump over Harris, his head may fall off. But our winner, why, Olivia Newsy and Ryan Lizza and RFK Jr. You choose. I'm too busy laughing. Truth be told, I was just beginning to get tense about the election, and somebody had just asked me, that story with your ex and RFK Jr. just kind of petered out, didn't it? And I said, what do you mean by petered? And then I said, don't worry, it'll pick up again when New York Magazine fires her and Politico fires him. And I guarantee you both of those things are going to happen. And then they will sue New York Magazine. She'll sue New York Magazine and he'll sue Politico, although it'd be much more interesting if they switched. And when Cheryl Hines sues him for divorce, you watch, it'll pick up then. But truth be told, I was beginning to worry. I mean, I'd really come to depend upon this story to cheer me up and to make me believe in a caring universe that clearly wanted me to get all the laughter and vengeance I could ever eat without ever having asked for it. And then there was a new story yesterday. You may recall Olivia, who is the mother of my two oldest dogs, sued her ex-fiancée Lizza, the most boring guest in the history of Countdown, claiming he had hacked her phone and leaked the RFK story and tried to blackmail her into getting back together and, sex. Clearly, if the story's true, what he should have done, he did this wrong strategically. What he should have done was call her up on the phone. Am I right? Now, Lizza has responded. His court answer is in, and in it he says, quoting a news report, she admitted to having a romantic affair with Kennedy and that she described the relationship as toxic, unhealthy, psychotic, and indefensible. Lizza said Newsy told him that Kennedy wanted to possess, control, and impregnate her. Same. So wait, RFK wanted to impregnate her while the entirety of the relationship was conducted on FaceTime? I know that's insane, but at least I begin to understand what she may have meant when she reportedly said his FaceTime sexual prowess was highlighted by his stamina. Don't worry, hon. I can impregnate you via long distance. Man. Her relationship with me when I was, 700 years older than her was like the most normal thing that ever happened to her. I mean, we had dogs. I mean, it's so, in retrospect, so boring, it's unbelievable. You went out with Attila the Hun? Yeah, it was the most boring relationship. Also from this story, long distance. Liza claims Newsy said, quote, there was a huge power disparity between herself and RFK Jr. Liza said he didn't steal or hack any of Newsy's devices, as she claimed. Everything I know about her affair comes directly from Ms. Newsy herself, he wrote. In a statement, Newsy's counsel also said Liza's filing was full of salacious and irrelevant claims that we will not dignify with a response. I don't hear a denial. The counsel said Newsy, who was granted a temporary protection order, is taking legal action to ensure her safety and be left alone. I hate to tell you this, Liv. The be left alone part, that ship has sailed. Circle back on being left alone around the year 2033? 4? The report says a rep for RFK Jr. says this description of his relationship with Olivia is, quote, not true. I mean, what did you expect? What sort of statement did you expect? He was going to say, wait, which phone number was she? He does sound like Krusty the Clown. What? There was also a detail that they buried at the end of their story. Liza says in the filing that he broke off his engagement to Newsy in August, after which Newsy pleaded to reconsider rekindling their relationship. Liza also alleged that Newsy had a separate affair in 2020 that allegedly compromised the pair's book deal. Now, this is an observation. For 2 years, their bios said they were working on this book on Trump that was going to come out in 2020. Then in 2020, their bios changed to they were working on a book on Trump with no date on it. This idea that she screwed around and screwed up their book deal is so on point about their relationship that it is as if it were scripted. You may have noticed my attitude towards this has been, in large part, in one word, popcornian, or a pox on both your houses. And again, given RFK Jr.'s involvement, this might be literally correct about the pox. I really haven't decided who I would help if asked. And by the way, I know stuff. I know stuff that they don't know I know. But I will say they were perfectly matched. I mean, Liza and Newsy. I mentioned once that when we still lived together, Olivia Newsy would go to Washington a lot on stories, and she'd always say, do you know this guy, Liza? He's stalking me. Although she used that word stalker very, very, very loosely. As time elapsed and more of her issues came to the fore, and eventually they led to our breakup, when I found out then later that she and Liza were dating, and this is before he was fired by The New Yorker, where she wanted to work, and she wanted to work there with a passion that really didn't seem rational. It was very extreme. I had half a thought to send him a text saying, listen, pal, I don't want to alarm you, but if one day she kills you and then wears your body into the New Yorker offices and tells everybody she is you, don't say I didn't warn you. Anyway, I haven't mentioned which news outlet I've been quoting because that may be the funniest part of the whole thing. The story I have been reading to you is from the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal? This is in the Wall Street Journal? Yes, my scandal has been covered by the American Academy of Crossword Solving Artists magazine, quarterly. My God, it's covered in the Wall Street Journal. Now, they played it kind of blah, to their credit, not the fellow Murdoch-owned New York Post, which of course put this on the front page again and added something the Journal did not have. Quote, the couple spent a few weekends together following the breakup where Liza describes a sobbing Newsy expelling her love and loneliness, along with her fear that Liza would never contact her again, the filing read. Olivia, my ex, Ryan, Liza, and RFK Jr. Wait, expelling? She was, quote, expelling her love? I'm hoping the Post writers simply got the wrong word there, or, I don't even want to know what the or could be. Today's worst persons in the world! Holy crap! spelling. They've done all the damage they can do here. Thank you for listening. We're now back to 5 episodes a week, posting nightly just after midnight Eastern. Honest to God, I was thinking of retiring after the election, but I have to stick around just for this story, don't I? We post nightly just after midnight. Please follow me for the podcast promo videos on TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram, and TubeTalk. Once again, I'll remind you there is a Monday countdown. If I can be bothered to work on a Sunday night, you can be bothered to listen on a Monday. Please send this podcast, or at least the link to it, to somebody who does not know that they need to listen but should. You could send it to Olivia. And the thing is, I never actually wished them ill. She brought me into the world of dogs. That does not mean I'm not going to sit here and laugh through all this. And I will testify if subpoenaed. Because, Brian Ray and John Philip Chanel, the musical directors of Countdown, arranged, produced, and performed most of our music. Also, if you know any other listeners to this podcast who bail out after the opening segment or even after Worst Persons, which is usually in the B block, you should tell them to listen to the whole show today. I mean, even if it takes a couple of days, because there's a lot in this show, isn't there? This particular one, this one goes up on the wall somewhere. I'd like to see it inscribed in tablets. Mr. Chanel of Ray and Chanel handled orchestration and keyboards. Mr. Ray on the guitars, bass, and drums. It was produced by TKO Brothers. Our satirical and pithy musical comments are by the best baseball stadium organist ever, Nancy Faust. The sports music is the Olbermann theme from ESPN2, written by Mitch Warren Davis, courtesy of ESPN Inc. Other music arranged and performed by No Horns Allowed or played from the Donald Trump in his own head radio station playlist. My announcer today was my late friend and hero, George Carlin. Everything else was pretty much my fault. Although today, most of it was not my fault. That's Countdown for today. 2 weeks and 6 days until the 2024 presidential election and the 1,380th day since convicted felon Dementia J. Fugue State Trump's first attempted coup against the democratically elected government of the United States. Use the election, use the mental health system, use presidential immunity to keep him from doing it again while we still have a chance. The next scheduled countdown is tomorrow. Bulletins as the news requires. Until the next one, I'm Keith Olbermann. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, and oh, look, I can hit the post. Good luck.